Welcome to the Great Girlfriends podcast, where we discuss life, love, laughter, and every single thing in between. I'm your host, Sybil Amuti.
And I'm excited as usual to bring to you this week's episode.
So jump right into this week's episode. And after you do, head over to iTunes and leave us an amazing review. That's how other great girlfriends know the quality of the content that we provide each week. Enjoy.
Hey, great girlfriends. It's Sybil here. And all I can say is wow. Wow. You know, we're at the beginning of June. Well, let's say we're at the middle of June now. And what has felt like an entire year has been summed up into 6 months. You know, when I look at the roll of events over the beginning of 2020, I can only sort of screech in my seat because there has been so much activity, great girlfriends. And I know so many of you have expressed feeling tired and feeling numb and feeling paralyzed and feeling overwhelmed and burdened by just 2020 and what has taken place thus far. But I do want to say that there has been such a beautiful awakening and unveiling that has taken place as a result of the loss of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And I could even go down the list of so many other countless names that have fallen victim to police brutality here in the United States. Let me be clear in saying Great Girlfriend community is comprised of women of all races, nationalities, religions, etc. But let me be very clear in saying that as a Black woman here in America, Black lives matter. Black lives have always mattered, and they will always, forever and ever matter. And there's a time and a season for every sentiment. And in this season, there's a rising that has taken place in our culture, very similar to what happened in the Civil Rights Movement. But the essentialism of this season is that Black Lives Matter be heralded across around the world as the movement that propels us forward. And here's why. As an American citizen, symbolism is one thing, activism is another. It is very important that we understand saying Black Lives Matter is a form of symbolism. It is a display and honor and recognition of the fact that the oppression that has taken place systematically in this country for over 400 years needs to be disbanded so that Black citizens have equity and equality to help influence and shape our quality of life here in this country. If you're not a Black person, if you're not a person of color, you can't imagine what it looks like to live in this country, to feel tired, to feel grieved, to feel exhausted, to feel overwhelmed, to feel burdened, to feel overlooked, to feel disenfranchised, to feel perceived as less than, to feel as though your color is a threat. You can't imagine those feelings. You can't imagine what it feels like to be the only one in the room and no one asks why, or to ask questions and be dismissed because people feel that you're going too far left or too far right where race is concerned, and it makes people uncomfortable. You can't understand those things, but you can be empathetic by becoming an ally. Activism is not an option at this point. It never has been, but by God, maybe this awakening, this unveiling is a reminder to people who have been silent, who have been bystanders, to be upstanders. Maybe this awakening, this unveiling is an opportunity for people to see the role that they have played in the struggle for equality and equity for people of color in America and even abroad. And maybe this unveiling and this awakening is an opportunity for you, a listener of the Great Girlfriends podcast, to challenge your relationships with race and community, and the ways that you can be used as a catalyst for progress within your personal and professional relationships. You know, this unveiling has forced me to even do soul searching and understanding of the more that I can do. I do my part. I feel very, very active as a citizen of color and a mother of color and a wife of color. But I know that there's more that I can do to advocate for voices of those who cannot be heard in the ways that I can, for people who don't feel they have opportunities that I'm afforded, for people who may never see some of the boardrooms that I've been afforded or the platforms that I've been afforded. I have a role to always stand on their behalf. I have a responsibility to George Floyd and to Breonna Taylor and to Eric Garner and to Trayvon Martin and to all the other voices, countless names that have been lost to police brutality. I have a role in standing up for their justice. I have a role in teaching my allies what it means to listen, to hear, and to understand what I feel, what my community feels at large, and how we are each necessary. We are each essential to the build and the progress that happens from this point forward. So, I ask you, great girlfriends, this community, we don't sit idle as great girlfriends. We are intended to play our part as change agents in this world. If you felt it was okay to be silent, if you felt it was okay to be still, if you felt to be numb, and to fall victim to, the voices of the stronger people who have talked louder than you, who have held you back. And I'm going to challenge you right now to rise up. I'm going to challenge you to look at your legacy in activism. I'm going to challenge you to look at your legacy in racism. I'm going to challenge you to look at your life and all of the many ways that you get to contribute towards solutions in our culture. You know what? It's very important that I stop now and just tell you that you're not alone. I know it can feel lonely in the boardroom. I know it can feel lonely in your car. I know it can feel lonely as the only parent. It can feel lonely on the PTA. It can also feel lonely in your community. It can feel lonely, even if you're in a church or if you're in a religious group where you are a minority. I know the feelings of aloneness or loneliness, but I want you to recognize that the voices of the community have cried out and are crying out loud and strong. And we have a right in this season to really, really stimulate and cultivate something fresh and new for our culture, for our children, if we can see this opportunity. So here, I want you to be able to challenge your relationship with race and community in the ways that you can be used as a catalyst for progress within your personal and professional relationships. Now, I said this earlier in the show, but I want you to take this on with intention and take this on with heavy consideration. Challenge your relationships. Challenge the people with whom you are doing life, your peers, your loved ones, your great girlfriends, your coworkers, your mailmen, the people that you relate with on an everyday basis. Challenge your relationship with race and community and look at some of the ways that you can be used as a catalyst for progress. Remember, if you're not moving us forward, you're standing us still, which will ultimately move us backward. And when you look at your personal and professional relationships, what do they look like? Are they diverse? What are your sentiments? What's the culture of those relationships? We've tried to activate great girlfriends over the years in different ways to get you to stimulate your relationships. We talk a lot about what your great girlfriends should look like as a force for change and how you can use one another to help groom and grow your accountability to whatever your dream is. What is your dream for our culture, American culture? What is your dream for your race? What is your role in fulfilling that dream? Take a good look at that and really get a deep understanding of how you are meant to move and navigate in what has been, again, I consider an unveiling and also an awakening. Then add your voice, add your vote, add your volume to the movement. Remember that silence is not an option. I was having a conversation with two great girlfriends, Sherry Salata and Nancy Holla, earlier. And in that conversation, we talked about I Can't Breathe being a culture. If you look at so many communities in America where Black people of color are disenfranchised, you see where there has been a paralysis of some sort, a choking, a constant choking. Even at Reverend Al Sharpton at George Floyd's homegoing in Minneapolis said, get your knee off of our neck. The knee on the neck. What that has meant symbolically in our communities is so disheartening. And so you also may have noticed at George Floyd's homegoing, in the mural behind him, it said at the bottom, "I can breathe now." And, that plea for life reminds me that this is a life or death movement, meaning your participation can breed life or breed death. You can breed progress or you can breed regression. You can be a part of the solution or part of the problem. But being a bystander is not an option. The only option is to be an upstander. The only option is to stand tall, be strong, be loud, be proud, and recognize that your voice is such a major contribution to the millions and millions of voices who are speaking out right now. And as long as you can keep that steady sound and that steady movement and that steady progress and really begin to localize your intent, the global impact will be made known, your legacy will be fulfilled, and your dream for race culture in this country will be actualized. So that voting part, that's locally, that's really, really taking intentional action towards being a part of local legislation. That voice part, that advocacy part, that's happening at work, that's happening in your home, that's happening with your neighbors, that's happening, at your church, that's happening even in other advocacy groups. There's so many groups that you can become a part of that help to teach and support the dissolve of racial injustice here in America and abroad. And I want you to understand that your voice matters, you matter, your movement matters. I don't want you to ever feel like your participation is optional. It's so important that you know that 5 fingers make a mighty fist. I also want to share with you an organization that I'm supporting that I'm incredibly proud to see the work that they're doing. And Tamika Mallory is one of the founders of this organization, Until Freedom. Until Freedom is an intersectional social justice organization rooted in the leadership of diverse people of color to address systemic and racial injustice. At Until Freedom, we believe that those closest to the pain are closest to the solution. Therefore, we focus on investing in those who are the most directly impacted by cyclical poverty, inequality, and state violence. We are a clearinghouse for advocates, new and budding activists, seasoned community organizers, students, movement lawyers, entertainers, artists, policy experts, formerly and currently incarcerated individuals, and survivors of gun violence to work linearly to uplift all of our people. Everyone is worthy. Everyone is needed to win. UntilFreedom.com is an organization that I'm supporting and that I have advocated for, and I will also encourage you to put some money behind. Again, freedom comes with a cost. It is not free for activists to travel, for activists to fly below the radar, for them to have security, for them to have safety, for them to have food, for their needs to be managed in every city that they travel. They need money, they need resources, they need support. And that's going to come from people like myself and like you and the rest of the Great Girlfriend community who believe that the change that they are working towards is needed. So I'm asking you to make an investment in Until Freedom, and their Cash App is $Until Freedom, and you get to put your money behind the support that you say that you want to offer towards eliminating or dissolving racial injustice here in the country. It is so important, Great Girlfriends, that we show the world what we're capable of doing as women of color, as women who are allies to women of color in this community. And again, I recognize that our community is comprised of women of, so many different races, and that culturally we are quite a mix when it comes to this podcast. But I do want to also say, as a woman of color and founder of this podcast, it's important that you understand that I am pushing and advocating aggressively to ensure that the voices are heard at the time that it is needed most. And this is an ongoing conversation about Black Lives Matter that has started with each woman saying yes to that call and agreeing to step into it. So there's my thoughts on that. I've given you Until Freedom as a resource, and I also want to give you as a resource your Great Girlfriends. I want you to jump into the Great Girlfriends Facebook group and commune with other women who are having conversations about what's taking place in our culture, conversations that we need to have with our children, some of the activism that they're taking as parents, roles that they're playing in their local PTA, letters that they're sending out to teachers, letters that they're sending to their municipalities, to their leaders, to their police chiefs and other officials locally and nationally, and also the fellowship of women who also feel the pain that you feel, but we're pressing forward in joy and delight with the hope that we can be sisters to one another. We can be allies and connectors and advocates for one another in the time of need. So with that being said, the Great Girlfriends Facebook group is the next step for you to really, really plug into community and get the culture heartbeat of the Great Girlfriends, and also feel supported and anchored, knowing that we're covering you and that we're constantly working with our brands. We're constantly working with our community to help build out programming that supports diversity and growth for women of color and advantages for those of us who need them. Having said that, I wanted to make sure I gave you some books, some really great reads, right? Because there are some essential readings that you can take if you're at the start of this conversation, or if you're asking questions right now. There's a few books that I stand beside that are new reads, but still very important reads around race that should be on your list. And so I want you to grab your pen and paper and take note on a few of these. The first one is So You Want to Talk About Race. That's a really, really great read about race and conversations and questions that people aren't asking about race. And it's a resource for anyone who shied away from that conversation, to really kind of get into it and begin to see how you can use your voice outside of the book. The next one is The New Jim Crow and Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. It is a very powerful read. It breaks down the ways the United States criminal justice system targets Black people in the new Jim Crow. And you can read this book and you can gain a deeper understanding into the systemic ways that Black men are targeted. Black people, Black men specifically, are also very targeted. And injustice will make more sense for you if you are still confused on any of this. Between the World and Me is another powerful read. And this is a read about the ways that racism is deeply woven into the fabric of this country. And so it's an experience piece, and it talks about democracy and freedom. But it points out the ideologies of democracy and freedom with Black people, on the backs of Black people. So the next one is Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. It's a very interesting read, but the author of this book, and this book is, I can't think of the author's name, is Rennie Edo Lodge. I have this written down. And she just talks about the privilege of it all and why the emotional disconnect is what keeps people separate. And it's a really interesting piece that I think every person should just grab. The last one is Audre Lorde, Your Silence Will Not Protect You. I tell you, this one is powerful. It is powerful. It's a discussion about raising her Black son. White feminism, Black feminism are not the same. And, it is a good read, and you can probably catch a Kindle version of it because the prints are probably sold out, but it is a powerful read. You should have it on your bookshelf. And those are the 5 that I want to give you today. Organizations, definitely Until Freedom is one of your first stops. You want to make sure you are following their work, you are advocating, and you are supporting their work. I would encourage you to take a look at the research. PewResearch.org, the Pew Research Center, gives you a lot of information on disparities between Black and white policing, our relationships, our perception of race in the country, all the things that, you may feel or guess. Well, all the guessing is eliminated. Views on race in America, the gap between the number of blacks and whites in prison. All of those conversations are being had, and the data is available to you at pewresearch.org. And, your last, and I want to say your last and final stop, but your other resource that I want to make sure I offer out is blacklivesmatter.com. It's really, I guess the home destination, if I should say. It's the headquarters for information about local chapters of Black Lives Matter, resources and programming and global actions and videos and, materials that you can use to really advocate and get yourself planted in the movement for Black Lives Matter. And, for me, these are some start places. These are some start resources and some conversations that I felt necessary and some reminders I wanted to offer out to you. Great girlfriends, it's been a minute since I've had a real true smile, like a deep, deep, happy, joy smile. Because personally, there's so much going on with my family and my father that I mentioned to you all back in January. So you can go back and listen to the New Year's message if you want to know more about that. But the heaviness of this season has been overwhelming, and some of the work that I've been doing is helping our brands locate their role in community, advocating for resources, financial equity, investments that help support the work that you do, great girlfriends, in your businesses, and in programming that we can offer to really activate and get you opportunity, more equity, more seats at the table, And so, for that reason, you might hear that there's a little low in my voice, and it's just because I'm rebuilding emotionally and I'm rebuilding mentally to help really sustain and create stamina for the work that I'm called to do. So keep me in your prayers. Keep each one of your great girlfriends in your prayers as I pray for you. Let's continue to stay plugged into this podcast as a resource. And I promise you, I see better days ahead. I see this opportunity as an invitation for each one of us to become strong upstanders in the transformation of this community, of this culture, of this village that we call America. And I know that we will be prouder. We will be more, we will be greatly rewarded by the work, the labor that we put in now as our children get to move into a new wave of living, of being, of dwelling in this country. And so I want you to remain optimistic and hopeful. I want you to remain in high expectation. And I want you to, remain connected and plugged in to share what you're feeling and your sentiments so that you don't feel the aloneness that so many people can oftentimes take on during this season. I love you dearly. Have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day. And do share this podcast with at least 5 of your great girlfriends so we can really spread and viralize this movement even more.
Great girlfriends, did you enjoy this week's episode of the podcast? If so, would you please give us your amazing review on iTunes? Every single review helps another great girlfriend get plugged into the podcast, into the community. Speaking of community, make sure you join our Facebook group, The Great Girlfriends. You follow us on Instagram at The Great Girlfriends and on Twitter at @the_greatGFS. Last but not least, we'd like to thank my amazing husband, Kwaku, Sam and Dilly, and all of you for being a part of the global community that makes us so strong. Please remember to share with your friends, keep listening, and keep being a great girlfriend. I'm Sybil Amuti, and I'm out. Peace.